Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Short webinar today, a 30 minutes webinar. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Tessa. I am the onboarding specialist at Easygenerator. Now, I do have Vera on the line as well, who's here to answer questions in the Q&A. Megan will be joining us as well shortly, also to have a look at the Q&A. Just to let you all know, this session is being recorded and it will be sent out to everyone either this week or next via email. If you have any questions throughout the session, please make use of the Q&A that my colleague Vera and Megan will be monitoring. If you'd like to just chat with the other participants or leave comments, you're also welcome to use the chat. And there, make sure that you are sending the comments to all panelists and all attendees if you'd like everyone to see it. But once again, for questions, please make use of the Q&A. Now, in this webinar, I'm going to introduce our newest feature within Easygenerator, and that is resources. So in addition to creating e-learning courses or assessments, you can now also create resources. In today's webinar, I'm going to tell you all about how to do this, why you should do this, when you should do it, and I'll also show you how to do it, how to create it. So let's get right into it. First, what are resources? What do they do? Resources essentially allow you to support colleagues and employees on the job. It allows you to share your knowledge quickly and easily. And the key word here, or I should say the three keywords here, are on the job. That is where resources differ to e-learning courses or trainings that you may already be used to creating on Easygenerator. Resources are short, concise, and easy to scan performance aids. They're really granular because they focus on specific tasks or processes. They can include step-by-step instructions or lists, and they're so useful on the job because they're really easy to access on demand. They can be even searchable, like your own little Google, and of course they can be linkable to e-learning courses or training materials for more extensive information and context. The end goal of a resource is to support your fellow colleagues or employees on the job. And the elements I've just mentioned are the characteristics that make on-the-job support possible. So a resource isn't the same as an e-learning course like you may be used to creating. A resource is more about quick, just-in-time support. Now, you may be wondering, what does this look like? Some of you may have used it already, so this won't be a surprise. We have two types of resources available in Easygenerator. We have the checklist and the how-to. Now, both of these allow you to support colleagues or employees on the job. They allow you to help them with tasks, with processes, ensuring that they can be done quicker, more efficiently, less often incorrectly, and maybe be done the same way each time to standardize it. So let's zoom in on the two of these more specifically. First off, the checklist. A checklist is a list of items to complete that can be ticked interactively so that your colleague or employee can keep track of the task or process that they are conducting. As an example, you could create a checklist for employees or colleagues who would need to close the store if they were the last ones to leave. It would have elements such as ensuring the lights are turned off, the security alarm is on, cash is out of the register, and so on. Now, the goal of such a checklist would be to minimize mistakes, to support consistency, and of course, completion. If you use a checklist like this, nobody will leave the store forgetting or close the store forgetting any single thing to do. The other resource that we have is the how-to, and here's an example of that. Here is an example of a how-to guide on how to conduct a good sales call with a prospect. Now, this is probably something that the agent who's using this would have already been trained on, but the checklist is there to help them while they're on the job. That way they can conduct all of the steps correctly without forgetting anything. Maybe step 1 is to research the prospect. Step 2 is the greeting and introduction. And in fact, in each step, there are things or elements that should really not be forgotten. And the goal of this guide that is used on the job, maybe they open it up before they pick up the phone or when they're already on the call. This is going to ensure thoroughness of the process, ensure that nothing is left forgotten, ensures that maybe everyone follows the best practices, in the end, increasing the likelihood of a successful sales call. Now, resources have huge benefits, both for the receiver, which in this case is your colleague or employee who's using the checklist, but also for you if you're the one creating it. For the receiver, it allows them to have access to support while they are working. This means they can pull out or search for a resource exactly when they need it, just in time. As a direct result, this offers them independence on the job. They can, in fact, now do it on their own with the help of that resource, of course. Now, for you, you're able to create a resource really quickly because a resource is so short. It doesn't take you a lot of time to create it. Now, it's also easy to make available and to update whenever required. Another important one, if you share a resource, you will notice fewer ad hoc requests for help, whether those were typically directed to you or maybe to any of your other colleagues. That time is now going to be freed up. Now, in the end, the resource itself has benefits too. The resource allows processes to be standardized, higher efficiency, minimized mistakes, greater focus, and also other benefits depending on the topic of that resource. So now that you know what resources are, hopefully, I want to help you make the decision of when you should be using it. Because I can imagine at this stage you may be a little bit confused. Well, when should I be using e-learning courses? When should I be using resources? Does one replace the other? How does that all work? Now, I can give you the quick answer already. Resources do not replace e-learning courses. The two can, in fact, be used to complement one another. And I'm going to explain this now. Here's a depiction of what we call the 5 moments of learning needs. Now, don't be scared about this image. I will walk through it. Learning needs are moments where someone can or needs to learn. The moments where someone thinks, hey, I think I need help here. And this shows 5 of them. There are 2 moments of learning needs in the training phase and 3 in the sustaining phase. And I want to change this over to something a little bit more practical. Now, the training phase is where someone learns either new things or more things. This happens in kindergarten, in school, it continues to happen in university, formal professional training, onboarding, induction. And in that training phase, the learning curve is steep. There's a lot of learning going on there. You're learning new concepts, processes, strategies, and so on. After that training phase, it's important that the new knowledge is also used, or else it's going to be forgotten. You can see that the steep dark-colored decline in the graph, that is what happens if new information isn't used. That's what we call the forgetting curve, the forgetting that occurs when information isn't used. So in that transfer phase, it's important that they use what they've learned to consolidate their knowledge. Now let's imagine that has now happened. After all of that has happened, there are going to be moments where information actually needs to be applied in practice. There are also going to be moments where problems arise that need to be solved. And also moments of change, many of them, that need to be accommodated to. And those 3 scenarios are also moments of learning needs. Those are also moments where someone thinks, hey, I think I might need help here. So those are the 5 moments of learning needs, 2 in the training phase, 3 in the sustaining phase. Now you may be wondering, how in the world does this relate to e-learning courses or resources? I'm about to explain that now. For those first 2 moments of learning needs, when someone has to learn something new or learn more about something, This can be done through e-learning courses, maybe even face-to-face training or a combination of the two. This is the more formal training phase where the learning curve is still steep. And an e-learning that can be more broad and extensive is perfect for this. Think back to your own onboarding, perhaps, or the way you currently see onboarding done in your organization. Maybe an e-learning, maybe a virtual live training, face-to-face coaching. Either way, it's a more formalized training on typically a broader topic that has a steep learning curve. On the other hand, for the last 3 moments of learning needs, when someone already has gone through the training, it's helpful for them to still have support at hand while they're on the job, to make sure that they can correctly, efficiently apply what they've learned with ease, but also to allow them to solve unexpected problems or to accommodate easily to perhaps unprecedented changes, which in an ever-changing world is definitely necessary. And when those kind of on-the-job situations arise, nobody really wants to stop and look for the e-learning course or the training materials to find an answer. Most people on the job want to search and quickly find an answer to continue whatever they were doing. The kind of Google it feeling that I'm sure we are all familiar with. Now that is when resources are most useful, because resources are short, quick performance support that helps put someone on the right path again. So let's move away from the theory and go into a really concrete example here. Let's imagine you're part of a sales team. Now you have a colleague joining and you want to help him or her get acquainted with the job. So when this new colleague arrives, you want to make sure that they know everything about how to sell the product you're selling. Product A, let's call it. Now, there's going to be a steep learning curve here, especially if the person isn't really familiar with the product. Maybe it's a new role for them. Now, for that training phase, this is something that can be done through the creation of an e-learning course, maybe even several, maybe also complemented with some face-to-face training. This is the training phase where there's a lot to learn, and once again, that steep learning curve. Then, of course, your colleague will start to actually work. They'll start to sell the product in their day-to-day. So they're consolidating what they've learned in the training phase and learning on the job as well. But when they need to start applying, changing, or solving, then they're going to need extra support. First, apply. Your colleague or your employee needs to start selling product A with ease, as if they live, breathe, and dream the product. They may need support of a resource, making sure that they follow the steps in correct order each time to make it easier. Next, solve. Let's say the product has a new competitor now that didn't exist during the training phase. They're also going to need support regarding how to best deal with that in a sales conversation. And the last one, change. Let's say the product now has a slightly different price, whether it's higher or lower. What does that change for those kind of conversations? And how can you support your colleagues or employees with the conversations now? These situations can best be supported with resources because it's a quick guide or checklist that can ensure that they continuously improve and innovate the ways in which they work. So as a recap, no, resources do not replace e-learning courses. They can be used to complement one another. But that's not the only way that resources can be used. In addition to using resources to complement your e-learning courses, like I've shown you before with the training, the transfer, and the sustain phase, you can also use resources on their own to share instructions or support that simply don't require formal training at all. Some things don't. So for example, if you would like to support your team members setting up their home offices, you can help them with the process through a checklist. Make sure that you have a comfortable chair, that the screen is at the right height in comparison to your eyes, that you have good lighting, and so on. You wouldn't maybe need an entire e-learning course for that. And in this case, a resource may suffice. So now I want to provide some concrete examples for you. How does this really look like in the workplace? What are some real life examples? I have 2 examples to share. First off, here's a really practical example of how you could use a checklist for product quality control. This is probably more or less relevant for some of you, but it's just an example. Now, for this example, the person who's conducting the quality control has definitely been trained on this before during that training phase I spoke about. But by providing a checklist, you're making sure that it's done error-free, quickly, efficiently, and always up to date. That way, the employee can go about doing this without having to ask for help, without having to make errors or spending extra time. Now, what does this look like in practice? Well, maybe in the inventory room, there could be a QR code. The employee scans it and has the checklist in front of them in just a couple of seconds. They have it in their hands while they're conducting the check, and then they simply close it when they're done. This gives them added confidence. It also allows a more smooth process, and when they're done, they're certain that they haven't forgotten anything. And as soon as quality control standards change, or maybe a problem arises, let's say there's a rupture of stock, well, simply update the checklist, which I'll show you how to do later. You don't even need to change the QR code. It will be updated directly, and things can continue to run smoothly. Here's another example, this time of a how-to guide. In this example, your colleague can be supported with writing a sales pitch successfully. Again, this is probably something they've received some kind of formal training on, maybe through e-learning courses. But maybe the strategies have brushed up, competitors are changing, climates are changing. So by providing on-the-spot support, you can help them through those changes. Here, maybe the employee has access to several different guides, all for different scenarios. And when they reach that scenario, which in this case is having to write the sales pitch, they go over to their bookmarks, open the correct one up, and use it while they are working. They may also have a guide for objection handling, for churn, for a smooth handover. And it means that they have everything they need to conduct a thorough process, efficient process, and when they're done, they close it up. So it's really something that you use on the job. When you're done, you can just continue. So how can you really use resources? How do you get started? This is really easy. And if you've already created e-learning courses on Easygenerator, which most of you probably have, it's even more easy than that. A resource, whether it's a checklist or a how-to, is all on one page. So in fact, you simply just type up your items. You're welcome to include images, videos, documents. It's really just drag and drop here, which of course you are already used to on Easygenerator. My advice is to focus only on one topic, one task, one process. Keep it short and stick only to the essentials. If they need more context, more explanation, they can always refer back to the formal training material. But for the resource, give them just exactly what they want on the job. Now, once you've created it, which is a relatively simple process, as I've explained, of course, you also want to share it. And there are multiple ways you can go about doing this. The key here is just to make it easy or easily accessible and open to everyone who may need it. The first option, if you need it to go straight to someone or to a group directly and fast, simply send them the link. Copy the link from Easygenerator, send it out to the person or people who need to have access to it. This can be via email, via chat, anything. They open it and they've got the checklist in front of them. Up to them if they choose to, for example, bookmark it to keep it at hand. You can, if the resource is specific to a location, because of course it is on the job, you can also generate a QR code. You can find plenty of QR code generators online where you can add a URL and it will create a QR code for you. Now, this QR code can be printed out and made available where it's relevant. Now, then the learners would just scan the QR code and they have the checklist or the how-to guide in front of them. If you have a collection of resources, such as with the sales example, if you want to support your learners with whichever scenario they can encounter, or if you want to help with product quality control of 10 or 15 different products, then you can create a library of resources. This will become your mini Google. Your colleagues can just open up the document whenever they need help and search for the resource that they need. This can be as simple as creating a shared Word document or adding something onto SharePoint with all of the links of the resources and maybe a brief explanation for each one when they should be used. If you're using a learning management system, you can also embed it within your learning management system using the embed code as a sort of mini training item. You can also embed it within your e-learning course. If you have an e-learning course, you can embed it using the embed code as well. And that way it's inside your e-learning course, available for your colleagues and employees while they're in the training phase, but they can always refer back to it whenever they need just that resource. So now, well, you've created it, you've published it as well, or you've shared it in one of those ways. Now, probably soon you're also going to need to update it. That is the reality of the world we live in. Things need to be updated, and that is also very simple to do. To update a resource, whether it's a checklist or a how-to guide, you can just come back to Easygenerator, make the change, click on the button Update Resource, and it's updated real time. Whoever has that link, whether it's in that shared document, whether it's a QR code or something you sent via Messenger or email, the link will remain the same. So you don't need to recommunicate or make any changes to those documents. Your employee or your colleague has the most updated version at all times. And that is essentially it. This was, of course, a short webinar because the resources are also that simple. But of course, we do have 5 minutes left. I haven't been having a look at the Q&A, but Megan, perhaps you can jump in here. Are there any outstanding questions that perhaps we could answer live?
The only question that perhaps came through a few times was about results tracking on resources. Do you mind touching on that?
Yeah, good question. So essentially with resources, you do not have the possibility to keep track of results because there are no results, right? So with an e-learning course, you have questions usually that need to be answered. And in the results you have, did they answer it correctly or incorrectly? With a checklist, they're going through and checking items or going through steps 1, 2, 3, up until 5. So yeah, there aren't really many results there to be found. In addition to that, the purpose of the checklist is to support the colleague or the employee on the job. So that's the main purpose here of the checklist. So in that regard, yeah, tracking results would not be as useful here.
Yep, thank you. And yeah, there was another question as well on the recording. So yes, we have recorded the session and that will be shared with you after this, probably in the next week or so.
Yeah.
And yeah, any recommendations for a QR generator by chance? Maybe Google it. I don't know either.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with all of the QR code generators. I've tried it out before. Now I know that it's available. There are of course some free and some paid versions. depending on if you want, for example, your logo as part of the QR code or something like that. It's relatively easy to find online. So indeed, I would say perhaps Google it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see some advice in the chat as well, so feel free to have a look there. I see that a lot of people are adding some nice ideas in the chat for QR code generators.
Yes, I don't believe there were maybe any other questions. Someone was mentioning about creating a library of resources. Perhaps, yeah, when you do go into Easygenerator, under the resource tab, that's where you can essentially store all of the resources that you've created, either the checklist or the how-to guide, and then you can kind of build it out from there. I'm not sure if that is that answers the question.
Great. I think that that covers it, right, Megan?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Perfect. Then we made it yeah, to the end of the webinar. Short one this time. We make it with 2 minutes to spare. So thanks everyone yeah, for joining this webinar. I hope that it's helpful for you, that you've been able to identify moments where you can use either the checklist or the resource, and that yeah, there were some tips that were useful for you today. So the rest is up to you. Best of luck creating, and see you next time maybe.